Hey everyone, welcome to another G News update on Tuesday, the 2nd of September. Well, here we are at Oniroa Beach, and this morning everyone's talking about house prices. House prices are too high in New Zealand, and this has kicked in over a couple of decades, really, and everybody invested in houses for a long time now. Some people, had a renter in order to build up a retirement. Others got into full-on property speculation. But whatever people did and however old they were, what the end outcome has resulted in is that the future generations are all a little bit screwed, aren't they, when it comes to their opportunities to buy a house in their own country. So yesterday, when Christopher Luxon made out that it was essential that we must do this flogging off of New Zealand houses, existing houses, to wealthy foreigners that hold the gold visa, the Actor Investor Plus visa, he was basically making out that was essential when it was really quite optional. There also wasn't a great deal of evidence that anyone ever saw about, just what would be, expected. We know that it won't actually help anybody. It won't lower the price of houses. And we also know that Chris Bishop wants to lower the price of houses while Christopher Luxon wants them to go up. We've heard Bernard Hickey talking about how it's a bit unusual for someone that believes in a free market, a market-led response to everything, to expect a slow, continual increase in house prices. So once again, the kind of the rhetoric that's coming out of Christopher Luxon's spin doctors doesn't make any sense to anybody. It's just not the real world. And yesterday we saw this big sales routine trying to sell us all this concept that we must go ahead and give these people from a foreign land the opportunity to live here, even when they won't live here for more than about 21 days. Those houses will be empty, and it'll be the case that, most of them will just not even be here. It won't necessarily be the case that anything trickles down. And as Chris Hipkins said this morning, this $5 million investment probably could go into things like bonds, government bonds, which are oversubscribed at the moment. So there wasn't any real rigor in the policy. There were no details in the policy that could tell us whether, this might affect small farms, that kind of thing later as well. But what people did say, and you saw this on BHN with Karen McAnulty, is that we should expect to see the government, the National Party in particular, try to expand and widen the wholesale sale of New Zealand houses to foreigners during a housing crisis when we don't have enough houses for our own people, because this is what they believe in. And we all saw that at the 2023 election, when National were campaigning hard to flog off everything worth more than $2 million. So that was the threshold then. They also wanted to impose a 15% foreign buyers tax at the time that they hadn't done the homework on. It didn't add up. Then they didn't want to show you the spreadsheet. And Nicola Willis was laughed at by Jack Tame, who was pointing at a single piece of paper from a bit of a crotchety, useless piece of advice that Nicola Willis had got from the one consultancy out there that kind of was prepared to do her bidding. And it was all a load of bunk. Winston Peters got in the way at the time, said, well, these thresholds are too low. You can't call a foreign buyer a foreign buyer. And I won't have it because I have some political interests that I can serve if I go hard now. Now it looks like all of that's out the window, and the political interests for Winston are something else, because with about a year to go to another election, things have changed. And the interests of all the New Zealanders that don't like this policy, that don't want to see house prices go up, they don't want to see people coming here from another country and snapping up houses that should be for New Zealanders on the basis of flimsy rhetoric that says we must do this and welcome people that may just be buying up government bonds. because it's all such a sloppy, badly done piece of policy out of desperation to try and make out that we're growing the economy. Um, so, yeah, Winston Peters totally sold out. He totally sold out, and now he's playing semantics. He's saying that foreign buyers aren't foreign buyers if they're also investors. And he's trying to wriggle around and, serve his own self-interests ahead of the national interests of the country. And everyone can see that, apart from a few very gullible guppies that will always vote for New Zealand First because they're very, very loyal. And no matter how much they're lied to and how much the evidence is, it's a bit like sort of being love-struck and being cheated on day after day and still not waking up and smelling the coffee. You know who you are. So those were basically the really big stories overnight. And this all goes hand in hand with the way in which Nicola Willis was caught out and finally held to account in our mainstream media, not only in the New Zealand Herald, but also on One News last night, and now this morning on TVNZ Breakfast. She's under fire. She is her feet are being put to the flames because she knew all along about Quigley, but she only moved to say that he should resign when there was a bit of publicity about this whole thing. She sat on that, she waited, she knew. She didn't act sooner, and she should have acted a lot sooner because she knew. And there's no getting out of this. This is probably something that should see the end of her. We should see her resign. We should be calling for her resignation, and we shouldn't stop. There'll be a lot of pressure on newsrooms around the country to go easy on Nicola Willis. She's a former director of the New Zealand Initiative, after all, and they should be immune to accountability because they represent big money. Donors will not be happy if Nicola Willis is held to the same standard as everybody else. And this lack of transparency and sitting on the news and waiting until the Ombudsman comes in and forces the disclosure of information to come forward, and then standing to one side and saying they did it. I'm very disappointed in them because I believe in openness and transparency, which is exactly what Nicola Willis has said in the last few days. It doesn't work anymore. No one can trust the Minister of Finance. No one can believe a single word she ever says anymore. And I think Christopher Luxon really needs to sack her. She needs to go. This is the end. Come on, Christopher Luxon. We know you won't do this. We know you lack the balls. We know you're not a leader. We know that there's probably a coup going on within the National Party because of your lack of leadership. And we know Davey Boy and Winston Peters are running the country right now. But surely, Christopher Luxon, surely, instead of getting out and saying it's complete rubbish when it's completely the case and completely the facts, you should actually step up or resign yourself. Both of you should go, really. I think that's what the nation is asking for. Nobody saw this. Not even National Party voters saw how bad this would get. And here we all are today, sitting at Oniroa Beach as the tide is lapping on the shore here, and this terrible situation New Zealand has got itself into. Even Sue O'Neill has to admit that National has to go and that Labour are the best. And all of the trolls don't believe anymore the memes that they're posting on G News. So these are kind of big stories. Nicola Willis, the pink pantsuit, can't be trusted. The selling off and the selling out and the Judas betrayal by Winston Peters of the New Zealand First voter is pretty clear to see. And, the house prices haven't come down, just like the price of butter hasn't come down, just like your power bills haven't come down, just like the water bills aren't coming down, are they? We've got these councils that are being forced to amalgamate and come together when it comes to the water bills that have to be paid for, but they're all going up by thousands of dollars. We're the ones that are being squeezed at the end of the day under this government. We're the ones that can't afford to have the life we used to have. We're the ones that are being turned into renters and tenants in our own country with no opportunity to buy a house in our lifetime. And nothing has really been done about building more houses. Karen McAnulty made the point that this government under Chris Bishop, they crashed Kaianga Ora and they're building a lot fewer houses, so they're not trying to solve supply at all, and getting it going now after crashing it is still well behind what Labor would have done if Labor had been in power. We'd be well ahead by now, and everyone would be better off. There'd be more downward pressure. The excuses that we keep hearing about how everything in COVID was just in New Zealand, it was only the Labor government, and inflation was solely the spending issues, the misrepresentation of what Treasury is saying, even when Treasury is stacked with people that are basically Ruth Richardson aligned. It's just wrong that Christopher Luxon gets away with saying these things in front of the New Zealand Herald reporters, in front of the reporters from Stuff, in front of everybody that works at Radio New Zealand, and none of them lift a finger or a pen or a pencil to publish the fact that the Prime Minister is not telling the truth. The Prime Minister can just lie, and his rhetoric is never challenged. So why should we trust the media? But having said that, the media have redeemed themselves slightly when they finally come to the party about Nicola Willis, and it was led, I think, by Renee over at the Herald and then One News, and now even Jenny May on TVNZ Breakfast this morning. We're all calling for the scalp. We're all calling for accountability. We want fairness. We don't want Nicola Willis to get away with this again, to go scot-free, for us all just to move on and forget. But that's probably what will happen because money talks. So unfortunately, this is the country we live in, where the media are basically taking a big risk, because the people above them have got sort of persuasions. We've got Stephen Joyce as the chair of the New Zealand Herald. We've got a Canadian billionaire on the board over at NZME. We've got people on the editorial board that used to run the Centrist. So these are kind of whack-ball cookers, that are in favour of calling misinformation the facts. So, it's a pretty kind of tough environment if you're a journalist that wants to tell the truth. So heads up to everybody out there that wants to tell the truth, but that's feeling the squeeze and the pressure, and all those guys at Stuff that go to work every day but get paid crap by the owners there who are making a bit of a profit out of the whole thing while letting you guys go to the dogs. It's tough being a low-paid journalist, I think, and not being thanked much for the job you do. But when you do this job, here at G News, we do thank you for the work that you do, because we really need to hold Nicola Willis to account. We really need to call out Christopher Luxon's rhetoric when he lies and, apportions blame totally to Labor when it's actually all about COVID across the world, and it's all about there being a very, very good economic response in New Zealand and 20,000 lives saved. And you can't really call out social media for misinformation when you're standing there letting it happen in the mainstream as well. Can you? No, you can't. So here we are again, and we also saw this morning this terrible bit of news that Simon Watts was helping to bury the evidence to almost make it criminal in order to show how the very super uber rich in this country are not actually paying their fair share of tax, trying to conceal the evidence at IRD by reversing the law. Simon Watts is in there as fast as he can trying to bury the evidence. He's got a spade, he's covering it up, he's changing the law, he's trying to make it so that when the election comes and somebody like Barbara goes up against Nicola Willis in a debate between the finance ministers, that it's not possible to refer to the evidence or the data because the National have buried it. Burying is happening overnight in the darkness, and the newspapers revealed today that this is exactly what Simon Watts is doing. Now, Simon Watts is the guy that's responsible for those 40 water entities, for water done expensively, for the way in which councils face intervention anyway. They might be talking about how we'd like to protect our water pipes, and we believe in localism, but they're being forced by Simon Watts, who's also buggered up the climate reputation of New Zealand. We're now regarded as we win a fossil fuel award because of Simon Watts. Simon Watts, this guy is burying the evidence at IRD so that we can't see the tax status of all the super rich, so that when you do ask for a wealth tax, or Chloe or Labor go out there, or Barbara, talking about fairness in the tax system, there's no evidence because Simon Watts buried it. So this is all under the approving eye of Nicola Willis, as they rush to try and protect the wealthy few and load more and more burdens onto mum and dad, to all the kids growing up in this country now, so that you have to pay the tax. You have to keep paying the lion's share of the tax burden. And if, with the help of Mike Hosking and the radio host jocks at News Talk ZB, the public can be convinced that it's tax and spend from Labour, and that all of these other administered prices and taxes that have been introduced by National don't count somehow, as long as they're not reported that way, then this system that protects the unfairness can carry on for another 3 years. So, basically it's up to the New Zealander out there to see the fact that we need to change the tax system, that it is unfair, that there are all these extremely rich people out there that are not paying their fair share of tax. And when will we wake up? When will we all, as a country, come together and go, look, stop burying the evidence, stop these crooked games, stop this crowd, this National Party that's been taken over by the Atlas Network, stop them, and vote in the Labour, Green and TPM parties. This morning we saw an article written over at Stuff where we were reminded that about 10 years ago we all laughed in the face of people that said, house prices should come down. But now we're standing 10 years later clapping Chris Bishop for saying the exact same thing. So over time we do change our attitudes, but it seems that we can only change our attitudes if the National Party and Mike Hosking are blowing that trumpet at the same time. So if Mike Hosking would come to his senses and, stop actually pandering to the Atlas Network, to the ACT Party, and actually just step back and look at the facts and the evidence, then I'm sure he could persuade a huge number of New Zealanders that we need fairness, that we can do better, that the evidence is important. But fat chance that Mike Hosking is going to listen to evidence and data. This is all about being partisan. This is an old game. This is a gig where he's been very, very successful. He's the king of radio by clinging to ACT Party and Atlas Network ways of thinking about the economy. So it's pretty tough, for the rest of the country to be kind of held captive by NZME, Stephen Joyce and company, and Nicola Willis, as she probably goes scot-free again, and Simon Watts buries the evidence about the unfair tax system. And we've got all these people also out there, Fran O'Sullivan and all these other so-called sensible people telling us we need to raise the age of eligibility, which just makes it so much harder on people whose bones are weary, who are growing old, that can't keep working, but have to work harder and harder and longer, using false arguments, really. When you count the Cullen Fund, we don't need to raise the eligibility of super. We don't need to sell the country off to foreigners who are just going to buy up government bonds. We don't need to eliminate 6 words out of our books. This is all bunk. This is rubbish from Erica Stanford. And wasn't she excited yesterday? She was glowing that there were 301 people queuing up, to invest in New Zealand, but no details about what that investment means, whether it's going to actually help anyone. 5 million's not much, but you can take it to the bank that the National Party will be trying to lower that threshold in the next election. That's what the word on the street is at the moment. And that's probably what's going to happen as we erode and expand the wedge that's being put in, the edge and the wedge, and now they expand it because they believe ideologically in something that doesn't back New Zealanders. It doesn't say that we can actually own our own houses, that our young people can earn a spot to live in any of those 10,000 houses around the country, those houses that are coastal, that look out over the sea like this. They'll be lived in, or they'll actually just be empty, and government bonds, may actually just be the investment. It may not mean any jobs at all for any of us. So that's basically all I had to say. Again, the hat that I'm wearing, you're probably a little bit bothered by it, but it's not a Canadian Mounties hat. This hat was given to me last night by Vicky's dad, and it was owned by Vicky's uncle, who passed away. He used to work at Air New Zealand. And so I'm quite proud to wear this hat, and it's a fine hat that I couldn't wait to wear today, actually, to remind me of him. He was a very kind and interesting man who spent the time basically to learn te reo and quite a lot about Maori culture. He was a Pākehā, but it's quite inspiring. There are also other inspiring people all around us. This morning I was watching a young man that I'm going to interview tonight on Waiheke Radio, who goes around picking up the rubbish off the beaches. He's a living example of a kaitiaki steward, and I really like people that actually do walk the talk, actually go out and clean up the beach and go out and do good things. So it's inspiring. We could all do better. This morning I put up a quote from a well-known economist that kind of suggested that this whole group, this whole generation had stolen from their children and their grandchildren when it came to capital gains. And I think it was fair enough that people objected to that generalisation, because I'm not a boomer, but I'm the next generation on, and I've spent the last 10 years or more actually feeling quite, like it's the wrong thing to go buying a lot of houses and making capital gains. I've got children that are growing up, and they've grown up now, and they managed to get themselves a house, but only just, and man, are they loaded up with debt. So, I've sat beside people my age and older that are busy going out to auctions and buying up their third or fourth house because this is the way to make money. And I never did that. I forewent all of those capital gains, and they, thought of me as a fool. But this was the culture, in the last 20 years. This was the way, this was the solution. It was considered to be smart to go out and buy yourself a couple of renters. I just never did it because part of me just went, this is not good for the future generations. Now, I know that not everybody did this. I'm an example myself, but a whole lot of people did. There was a huge number of us that all did. And so these house prices, I think the number was something like, have gone up 245% in the last couple of decades. And what's that done? Has that helped us all? One generation or two in that space of time have feathered their nest. Now, I know it's not all of them, it's myself included, but it's probably a fair comment that a great deal of people have. It's coincided with neoliberalism, with Ruth Richardson, with this terrible history of the National Party and its social neglect. And we just need to get past it all. We need to get post-neoliberalism, post the property market. We've got to fall out of love with buying more and more houses, with Christopher Luxon, and he wants the house prices to go up. We've got to get out of that. We've got to get away from these people that are burying the evidence about a tax system. We need to vote in a Labour, Green and TPM government that will fix the tax system, that will look after the people, that will restore race relations, and, that keeps the New Zealand homes for New Zealanders. So that's all I have to say this morning. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all again a little bit later on. See you later.
Welcome to G News, the good news.
Yeah, right.